Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Development Permit Stakeholder Meeting for the 2023 renewal for the permit. My name is Rebecca Villalba. I am the team leader for the Stormwater team, and we are very happy to see you attend our meeting. We appreciate your involvement, your interest in our making this permit better. So I will go ahead and start by giving some welcoming and introductions. With me today, I have Michaela Coleman, who is a permit writer in the Stormwater team. I also have with me Dan Siebenacker, also a permit writer in the Stormwater team. Michaela will be presenting some items, and Dan will be helping us with the questions later on in the later portion of the meeting. So again, thank you very much. We really appreciate your comments, your input to make our permit better. So I just first have a few items that I need to discuss, some general items. So please note that we are still conducting meetings of this kind via virtual. They're not available in person due to the ongoing COVID situation. So I hope you understand that. But we're still very interested in listening to your concerns or comments. So during the meeting, please keep in mind several items. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. Second, we have saved time for questions and comments at the end of the short presentations that we have to give you to make sure that we all are on board about what we are proposing to do. At any time during the meeting, there is a chat box where you can go ahead and type in your comments. Any questions you have as we are discussing and presenting, feel free to provide that information on the chat box, and we will go ahead and review it and read it once we get to that portion of the meeting. We have provided a handout of the preliminary proposed changes that we have in mind for the 2023 construction development permit. Those are available on our website. Also, we will be posting on our website the presentation that we're giving later on this week. So please, make sure that you keep in mind that you're welcome to provide comments now or later. Do not feel pressured if you don't feel like you exactly know how to give us a comment. We welcome them at any time. So, now we will go ahead and discuss overview of the agenda. First, I will go over some objectives and goals of this meeting, and also give you a renewal timeline update, the process that we have planned for this construction development permit renewal. Then Michaela will give us a brief overview of the existing general permit so that you understand, some basics, as well as then give us the summary of the proposed changes to let you know with a little bit more detail of where we're coming from with those changes and why we're proposing them. Then after that presentation, then we will move over to the actual stakeholder discussion portion for this meeting, where we are going to welcome your comments and questions. I will be able to then moderate that piece of the meeting, and that's the main focus for today's meeting. Then we will adjourn the meeting at noon. So hopefully, this gives us plenty of time to engage in a good discussion as best as we can through this virtual medium that we have. So thank you. We will go ahead and proceed. So again, based on the agenda, this is the brief outline of the presentation. So I will go ahead and start with the first part, which are the goals and objectives for this meeting. So the goals and objectives are definitely to facilitate stakeholder involvement. If you've been with us in the Stormwater program for a while, you know that this is part of our general permit process. We want to get your input. We want to understand what's working, what's not working, what can be better. And we do that from two pieces, both from the stakeholder perspective for external permittees, consultants, but also from our internal TCEQ agency staff. So we really want to facilitate stakeholder involvement through this process, because you are the ones that are implementing this. And then of course, internal staff are the ones that are also implementing and enforcing it. So anything that we can do to make things better, we want to hear from you. We also want to review anything that we already have on on the queue as ready to go ahead and propose for the draft permit, we want to go ahead and discuss those so that you have the opportunity to provide comments or feedback in case you have any concerns or questions. We also want to gather right now any input that you have so that when we draft this permit, before we send it to EPA, we know already that we've considered your comments and not wait until the official public comment period before we hear from you. So we want to facilitate something at the beginning of the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a handout. And so this is the first page of the handout that we basically are going to be going through this. Proposed changes are in the handout, and you can obtain the handout from our webpage that is posted right now on this slide. And that's where you're going to find the preliminary proposed changes. And right now that is available already on our webpage, so you can go ahead and download it now if you want to. Next slide. All right, so now we'll go ahead and give you a brief overview of the renewal process and the timeline that we have prepared for this general permit. So first of all, if you're not familiar, our general permit process at TCEQ takes about 2 years. So anytime that we need to start working on this, we begin for a stormwater permit about 2 years before the permit is set to expire. Except for the John Graves permit, because that one, there's only a couple permittees, so our stakeholder involvement is slightly different. So that one we might start, about 18 months before. But basically, we start already with the process at the beginning of the process with stakeholder involvement, internal input. So we gather input from internal staff, every program area and the agency that is impacted or that implements or enforces this permit, such as our Office of Enforcement of Compliance, Small Business Local Government Assistance, our investigators, and then of course, other permitting staff and the water quality standards, the total maximum daily load staff. All of those people, we ask for input as well as input that we're asking you. So that's what we call the first part of the stakeholder involvement. Then we have what's called the concept phase. The concept phase is where we know what this permit is going to look like potentially. So we prepare a draft permit and the fact sheet based on the comments that we have received. Then we begin briefing management all the way from our section level to our water quality division level to our Office of Water level to our executive director's level. So we go through numerous briefings throughout the process to make sure that everybody understands the changes that we're doing, that we're proposing, and if there's any impact or concerns, then we need to go ahead and revisit those items. Then the second proposal, and so that's, at the concept phase is when we get permission from management to go ahead and send the draft permit to EPA, and EPA has 90 days to review the permit. After that, we move to the proposal phase. The proposal phase is when we have already received approval from EPA, we've incorporated any changes into the permit that EPA requested that were an objection, or any recommendations we feel are needed. Then we begin the process to brief management to let them know how the permit has changed and what comments we received from EPA. Then we go through the public notice process where we publish the draft permit and fact sheet in the Texas Register, and also we publish the notice in the newspapers across the state. So sometimes we do 5 newspapers, sometimes we do 6. It just depends on how much money we have that fiscal year, but we try to reach out all areas of Texas where we have the most construction general permit authorizations that are active. And then we also will have a public meeting, usually almost on the last day or pretty close to the last day of the comment period. Then based on the comments that we receive, we prepare a response to comments document, we revise the permit as needed, we go through the management briefings again, and then we go to Commissioner's agenda where we present our proposed final draft, final permit for consideration for adoption. And then at that agenda meeting is when the permit gets adopted. So this is a very brief outline for you to understand all the steps in the process that we go through to get a permit developed, a general permit developed. Next slide, please. So now specifically for this 2023 construction general permit renewal, this is graphic to show you where we are and where we're moving. And please note that these dates are estimated. Things can change based on objections we receive from EPA, the number of comments that we receive, and other things that sometimes can impact some of these dates. So don't hold us to this. We'll keep you updated as we progress if any of these dates change. But basically, September, October of this year, we did that initial phase of where we were gathering input. And right now, October, November, we are seeking stakeholder input. And we are going to go ahead and ask, for your comments and any questions that you have. We are going to give you 2 weeks from today to provide comments. So the comments will be due on November 5th. Then based on those comments, we will review every single comment. We will determine how best to proceed with them. We will prepare the draft permit November, January, including the fact sheet. Then in February, we're scheduled to go ahead and start briefing management to get permission to go to EPA, and then we will go to EPA and send them the permit for their review. And they'll be reviewing it between February and May. And then, of course, like all the other steps that I mentioned, briefings and all that. And then we're hoping to publish in August of next year in the Texas Register and newspapers for the 30-day comment period, when that's the official 30-day comment period for you to also have the opportunity to provide comments at that point. And then ultimately, on February, we hope to be going to Commissioner's agenda for adoption of this permit so that it's ready and effective on March 5th of 2023 when the current permit expires. So now we will go ahead and move over to Michaela, who will give us a brief overview of the construction zone permit.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so let's talk about our current construction general permit to make sure that we're all on the same page about what kind of things are included in there right now. So the current construction general permit was issued March 5th of 2018, and it is set to expire March 5th of 2023. It authorizes the discharges of stormwater associated with construction activities and construction support activities. Next slide, please. So currently the universe is quite large. We have about 24,000 active notice of intents. So that represents our large construction sites, and about 10 active waivers. Next slide, please. So it's important to understand how the permit defines construction activity, since we're talking about discharges from a construction activity. The permit defines this as things like clearing, grading, excavating, or similar activities that are going to disturb soil for the purpose of construction. So it could be demolition or infilling pits. It depends on if soil is being disturbed as part of those activities. What isn't included in construction activity would be routine maintenance activities, such as the grading of roads. Like if you're just resurfacing the top of a road, you're not actually getting down to the soil and disturbing that, then that would not be considered construction. Similar for routine clearing of a right-of-way. And then, of course, agricultural land disturbance. If land is being disturbed for agricultural purposes, we don't consider that a construction activity under this permit. Next slide, please. It's also important to remember that our construction general permit offers different requirements based on the amount of soil disturbance, and this includes common plans of development. So if a site or a common plan is going to be disturbing 5 acres or more, we would call that a large construction site, and the permit includes requirements specifically for large construction sites. If the site or common plan is disturbing at least 1 acre and up to 5, we would call that a small construction site, and it would follow the requirements in the permit for a small site. If the site is less than 1 acre or the common plan is less than 1 acre, then permit coverage is not required. Next slide, please. It's also good to note that here in Texas, we have a slightly different view of operators in our construction general permit. We distinguish between a primary operator and a secondary operator. And that's defined in the permit as follows. So the primary operator is the person on site that has day-to-day control over the plans and specifications and the implementation of the SWIP. So they're actually, boots on the ground at the site implementing the SWIP, and they have control over all of the day-to-day operations and changes that can occur. A secondary operator, however, doesn't have that same day-to-day control. They might be able to tell the primary operator how they want plans to change, but they're not actually there implementing the SWIP and controlling, what's occurring at the site each day. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very brief summary of some of the requirements included in the construction general permit. The big one being that operators need to develop and implement a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP. And that includes developing and implementing best management practices at the site to protect water quality. Our large sites have to submit their application or notice of intent, also called an NOI. And then all operators have to post a site notice, large and small, primary and secondary operators. Then all of our sites have to notify their MS4 operator or their municipal separate storm sewer system operator. And that's done by either sending them a copy of the notice of intent if it's a large site, or sending in a copy of the site notice if it's a small site. Operators have to perform regular inspections of all of the controls they're using at the site to make sure that they're in good condition and working the way that they're supposed to. And then if a site is operating a concrete batch plant under the construction general permit, we do require some benchmark sampling for that. Next slide, please. So the stormwater pollution prevention plan really makes up the meat of the general permit. It's the big requirement to comply with the construction general permit. There's a lot of pieces of it, but this is a quick summary of them. One being the site map. So you have to develop a map of the site and all the activities occurring. You have to describe what controls are being used at the site for stormwater. It should describe your procedures for your inspection, maintenance, and corrective actions at the site. It'll describe the estimated dates of construction activity, and then describe all the pollution prevention procedures being implemented at the site. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the existing construction general permit, right now that's the 2018 permit, but we are in the middle of amending the construction general permit to include oil and gas activities. So at the time of the renewal, that will be included in what will be the existing construction general permit. So we wanted to make sure everyone was aware that this is occurring. We started this amendment in February and April, and it's specifically to amend the construction general permit to allow oil and gas facilities to obtain coverage under TCEQ's construction general permit, since we are now authorized to implement stormwater permitting for oil and gas sites, where it had previously been under the Railroad Commission and EPA. So this amendment is only going to affect those oil and gas sites. It's not going to affect any existing permittees. So if you're somebody who currently has a 2018 construction general permit authorization, this amendment will not affect you in any way. It's simply adding the language that will allow construction operators at an oil and gas site to obtain coverage. So I mentioned we started that in February, and then in May and August, we went to an EPA review, and we worked through some comments from them. And so we have a version of the amendment that we published on September 24th in the Texas Register. So we're actively in the public comment period. So if you're interested in that, you can go find the published proposed amendment and provide us feedback as part of the formal public comment period, which is set to end on October 25th. And then once we end the comment period, of course, we're going to have to review all of the comments we receive, see if any changes are necessary to the amended permit language, and then we'll move forward to get it adopted. So we're hoping that we can go to Commissioner's agenda in January, and then we'll be able to issue the amended permit before EPA's permit expires in February of 2022. So it's going to, once it's issued, then all of the construction sites that are currently permitted under EPA's construction general permit will have 90 days to move over to our construction general permit. Next slide, please. So this new amended permit is going to allow eligible sites in Texas that are performing construction related to oil and gas exploration, production, processing, or treatment operations or transmission facilities to obtain coverage under the construction general permit. So that could be something like construction of administrative buildings or service roads at an oil and gas site. So traditional construction happening at an oil and gas site will now be eligible for coverage under TCEQ's construction general permit when the amendment is finalized. It could also be refined products pipelines. So construction activities related to that would be eligible for coverage, as well as a natural gas utility or the city-owned end user distribution system. So actually distributing natural gas to industrial, commercial, or residential customers. And the federal rules allow for certain types of oil and gas activities to be exempt from stormwater permitting. But there are opportunities for a site to lose their exemption. So if a site loses their exemption for one of those reasons, which could be that they have a discharge of a reportable quantity, or they have a discharge that contributes to a violation of water quality standards. So if that occurs and they lose their exemption, then they'll be able to get coverage under our general permit. Next slide, please. So I mentioned certain activities under federal rules can be exempt from permitting. Some of those include things like a natural gas pipeline compressor station, or a crude oil pump station or pipeline. So those are just a few examples. EPA put together a really great website to kind of explain when the exemption applies and provide examples of sites that could be exempt or sites that are not exempt. And we've provided a link on the slide here. I would recommend taking a look at it and see what kinds of sites will be eligible for coverage and which ones might be exempt. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've discussed what the current permit looks like or will look like at the time of the renewal, we want to share with you some of the changes we're proposing for the 2023 renewal and then start our stakeholder discussion. So it's important that we remind you all how we come up with our changes for the permit. The big one, of course, is stakeholder input. Like Rebecca already discussed, we get our input from you all, like we are in this meeting, as well as from our internal groups. Of course, our management provides us their input, what kind of things they want to see. And then we look at what EPA's draft construction general permit has. They have made several changes this year, and we reviewed those to see which things we thought might be good to incorporate, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. And then if there are any new or updated rules, we have to update the permit to comply with that. So you'll see we're proposing some changes for the e-reporting rule to be consistent in the general permit. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to share just some broad updates. The first is that we're hoping to add a header to the construction general permit that's going to identify the different sections and parts so that hopefully it'll improve readability when you're in the permit. You won't have to flip back to try and remind yourself what section and part of the permit you're in. And that'll make it a little bit more consistent with some of the formatting we've done in our other stormwater general permits. We also had a new bill passed during this second special session of the 87th legislative session, House Bill 7, and that bill prohibits TCEQ from issuing a permit for the construction or operation at sites for high-level nuclear or radioactive wastes. So we're going to have to explicitly prohibit that in our construction general permit, as well as update our applications to make sure that nobody's obtaining authorization for such a site. So that is a change we are proposing to make. Next slide. A couple of other broad updates. We're updating the provisional coverage for paper applications from 7 days to 48 hours. That's only going to be for paper applications that are submitted with an approved electronic reporting waiver, and that's going to make us consistent with other water quality general permits. We're also going to clarify some of the electronic reporting requirements in the general permit. So in the last construction general permit renewal, we were sort of in the middle of implementing electronic reporting, so we're going to make it really clear in the permit that all applications need to be submitted electronically through e-permits unless applicants submit and obtain that electronic reporting waiver to be consistent with the electronic reporting rules at the federal level. Next slide, please. We're also proposing a few updates related to the application or the notice of intent. So in the permit, we have language describing the minimum contents of the NOI, and we want to clarify a couple of things that are in our existing NOI and required by the federal electronic reporting rules by adding that line to the general permit. So we're going to clarify that we're also asking for the estimated construction project start date and end date. And we're also planning to update the actual NOI or waiver forms and in e-permits, the electronic reporting system, that for the construction activity types question, we want permittees to be able to specify that it's a project for a highway or road or utility line. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to dive into some of the proposed changes we have for the actual permit requirements. So in the section of the permit about site notices for large sites, we want to clarify that the sign has to be maintained until final stabilization has been achieved, instead of just when the construction is complete. So we're going to explicitly say final stabilization has been achieved, and that's going to make it consistent with the same language we use for small sites. We're also proposing to update some of the requirements for the site map. We're going to make it clear that the map needs to identify property boundaries, and where it identifies soil disturbing activities, it needs to note phasing and include demolition activities that disturb soil. And that's consistent with both the existing construction general permit from EPA and what they're proposing for their construction general permit in 2022. Finally, we're going to explicitly require that large site operators continue to comply with the conditions of the general permit until they've submitted their termination. That's consistent with EPA's permit and the requirements we include for small site operators. So really, we're just clarifying what's intended. We want to make it clear that operators have to continue their compliance until they've officially terminated their authorization. Next slide, please. Another clarification we're planning to make to the general permit is related to our allowable non-stormwater discharges. We're going to add the word emergency before firefighting activities. So it'll say that allowable non-stormwater discharges include discharges from emergency firefighting activities. And this is just to clarify the intent. It's only intended that you're allowed to discharge from emergency firefighting activities. That's consistent with all the other TCEQ stormwater general permits and EPA's stormwater general permits. Next slide, please. Finally, we're proposing a couple of changes related to inspections. So we're going to identify in Part 3, Section F, that any actions taken as a result of inspections, including the dates that those actions are taken, must be described in the SWIP. So we're going to specify that the actual dates the actions are being taken be recorded as part of the SWIP. That's going to be consistent with EPA's permit and help out our investigators whenever they visit a site and are reading through someone's SWIP. We're also proposing a slight word change on our inspection frequency schedule changes. This is just to clarify an existing permit requirement that was a little wordy, just to simplify it. So we're proposing that it say inspection frequency schedules can only be changed on the first of a calendar month, on the first day of a calendar month. So we're proposing that change in the general permit. Next slide, please. We're also proposing a couple of changes to sediment control practices regarding the control of dust and pollutants in stormwater. This is in Part 3, Section F of the general permit. And we're going to say that permittees shall minimize to the extent practicable the off-site vehicle tracking of sediments and dust. So we're going to move the generation of dust out of that sentence, and this is consistent with some changes EPA made to their 2017 general permit. So we're just updating our permit to be consistent. And then we're going to say that the SWIP shall include a description of controls utilized to control a generation of pollutants that could be discharged in stormwater from the site. Next slide, please. Also related to sedimentation, we're changing the language just a little bit in our sedimentation basin requirements. We're proposing that if a permittee wants to say it's infeasible to implement an outlet structure as part of their sedimentation basin, they'll have to document their supporting documentation on why it's infeasible, and then include any specific conditions or time periods when that infeasibility is occurring. That's consistent with EPA's existing permit and their proposed permit. So that's a small change we're proposing. And then we're also proposing to clarify that existing detention or retention ponds at a site might not be appropriate for use as a sedimentation basin as it's required in the general permit. So we're proposing to add that sedimentation basins must be designed for and appropriate for runoff at the site, and that existing detention or retention ponds might not be appropriate. Next slide, please. We're also proposing to add a requirement related to pollution prevention measures for wastes at the site. This is kind of clarifying the intent of this section of the permit, as well as making it more consistent with EPA's existing and proposed permit. So we're proposing to add this line in the permit that operators should minimize exposures of waste by implementing good housekeeping measures, and that wastes must be cleaned up and disposed of in designated waste containers on days of operation at the site, and they must be cleaned up immediately if those containers overflow. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next couple of changes we're going to talk about aren't included on your handout because they aren't changes to permit language, but we do want you to be aware these are some things we're considering adding to guidance we have related to the construction general permit. So we receive a lot of questions about storm events that occur over multiple days and how inspections need to occur. And so based on some information EPA is proposing to clarify in their permit, we're proposing that we'll clarify in our guidance as well. So if a storm event occurs over multiple days, for example, if it rains for 3 days and on day 1, 0.6 inches of rain falls, and then on day 2, a ½ inch of rain falls, and on day 3, only 0.3 inches of rain falls. So in that case, you'd need to perform an inspection within 24 hours of day 1, because that's above the 0.5 inches threshold. And then on day 2, you're also going to have to perform an inspection within 24 hours, because again, that meets that 0.5 inch threshold for the storm event. But on day 3, since we're only receiving 0.3 inches of rain below that 0.5 threshold, you would not be required to perform a third inspection within 24 hours. Next slide, please. Another clarification we're hoping to make in guidance is provide some detailed descriptions of sedimentation basins and clarifying the difference between detention and retention basins, because we've been made aware that maybe it's confusing for certain operators. So we just want to make sure that that information is available to our permittees so they have a good understanding of these types of controls. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we've shared with you some of the preliminary proposed changes we're considering for the construction general permit. We want to hear from you all what you think of some of the things we're proposing today. If there are things we haven't mentioned that you think would be a good change or something you want us to consider, we definitely want to hear that from you. The more detailed you can be in providing feedback, the better it's going to be for us to try and implement those suggestions. Additionally, we mentioned EPA has a proposed 2022 permit. They proposed several changes that we haven't shown as something we're planning to make, but we are curious what you all think of them. For example, they added a lot of requirements related to dewatering, such as performing inspections, or they have a specific requirement to route dewatering water through a sediment control for turbidity in that water. So those are some requirements EPA is considering adding that, maybe it's something we want in our general permit. We want to hear from you all on what you think of those kinds of changes. If that's something you think needs to be included in TCEQ's construction general permit, we would love to know what you think about that or any other changes EPA is proposing. So you can see at the bottom of the slide, we've also provided a link where EPA has posted their proposed permit, and they have a red line version, so you can see all of the changes they're proposing and let us know if you see any of their changes that you think TCEQ should include. So now I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, and she'll kick us off for our stakeholder discussion.
Thank you, Michaela. So now we will go ahead and open up the next portion of the agenda for stakeholder discussion. As I said earlier, and Michaela also, we welcome your comments and questions. So again, since we're doing this via Teams virtual, we cannot have a discussion where you speak to us. So the only way that we can receive your comments and questions is if you type them in the chat box. So please go ahead and type them in the chat box. We would love if you include your name. If you want to be anonymous, that's okay, we understand. But if you're anonymous and it's a question that we cannot answer, then we ask that you please submit that question to us via the emails that we will show you later on, so that we make sure that we respond to you back with an answer if we need to go back and research or coordinate with other team members to make sure that we have the appropriate answer given to you. But go ahead and, now at any time, provide your comments. If it's a comment, I will read those comments so everybody knows the comment that was received, but not necessarily will we have an answer. Sometimes there might be some comments that we might like what you're providing, and we might be able to say, oh yes, we're going to do that. But just understand, as we explain in the process, some things need to be discussed internally through, with other programs, the investigators and our management. So sometimes we can't really say, yes, we're going to do that. But please know that every comment is going to be considered, and we need to go through the proper process in order to determine what is ultimately included in the final permit or the proposed permit that we are preparing. If it is a question that you have, we'll be happy to answer that question if we know the answer. Like I said, otherwise we will respond to you in the next couple of days. So I will be moderating this. So please, hopefully, we will be able to go through all the comments in the time allowed. We have about an hour and a half, just slightly. We do have about 75 attendees, so that's great. We want everybody to have the opportunity to provide a comment or to ask a question if needed. And again, Michaela will be available for questions, as well as Dan Siebenacker and myself. So the three of us will be answering questions. Michaela and I have a camera, so you'll be able to see us, but Dan doesn't, so you will only be able to hear him. And hopefully, if you can hear him well, great. If you can't hear him, let us know in case we have some technical difficulties. As well, let us know, put it in that chat box so that we know what's going on and we can address any technical difficulties if we can appropriately. So we will go ahead and start. We have some comments already, so great. We will go ahead and begin. So I will go ahead and do the first one. Hold on, my system is trying to refresh. So Patrick says, I suggest clarification on the use of electronic scripts and electronic reports. Provide clarification for the definition of on-site. So thank you for your comment. We will take that noted and add it to our list of items to consider. I do know that EPA did add that into their proposed general permit, so we will be looking at that. So thank you for those comments, Patrick. Then Patrick also says it's in the proposed permit. Thank you. So then we have an anonymous comment. When will the presentation be available to be downloaded? Check link you provided in the presentation slides. Download was not available yet. So after this, we will make sure that we proceed with sending the presentation over to our IT group, and they will go ahead and post it. We have to go through an accessibility check, and that sometimes slows the process down. But early next week, the presentation should be included on our website. The handout is included on the website, but the presentation should be included early next week. Okay, then we have a question from City of Lubbock, Stormwater. Hi, City of Lubbock. On the online comments application, it states that we must submit an NOI permit number in order to submit a comment. As a regulating entity, how may we submit comments without entering an NOI permit number? Michaela.
Thank you. That's a great question. I was not aware that that was something the comment system is asking for. That is a system run by our Office of the Chief Clerk. So I will get with them and find out what needs to happen for you to be able to submit comments electronically. If it's possible for you to send me an email, that would be great so that I can get back to you with more information on how you can submit comments. Thank you. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Michaela. And I just want to elaborate a little bit on that, is that right now, currently, at this stage that we're in, you do not submit comments via the Chief Clerk's office. Right now, you submit comments to us via our email box, which is included in the handout for the agenda, in the agenda handout. And we will have a slide later on that we will show you that information. So currently, this 2-week comment period that we are in is an informal comment period. So don't go through the Chief Clerk's office. But when we do have the official comment period and for this general permit, when we publish notice next year, and currently right now for the amendments, for the oil and gas amendment, you can go to the Chief Clerk's office, submit a comment, and the number that you put in is the TXR number, TXR 150000. That's the number that you enter, and hopefully that'll work. We haven't heard of issues yet, but that's definitely a good comment that you sent us. Okay, so we have questions from Anonymous that says, good morning. Could it be possible to include mandatory SWIP training for contractors? That's a very good question, and we did have received comments internally. We did consider that, but because of how our state is in terms of how we develop and implement such a training program, like the wastewater operators training, the drinking water operators training, right now at this time is not something that's feasible for us to do. So we are not including that in the permit at this time. Okay, then we have more comments and questions from Tiffany, the city of Georgetown, just close by, a little north of us. So Tiffany asked, as an MS4, I would be concerned if inspectors or construction workers are going on site every day during rain events to inspect the site, especially if no other workers are on site. I do not want anyone risking their safety to visit the site every day if there's been significant rainfall. Can we revise this language or requirements? Thank you, Tiffany, for your comment. We will consider this in our, as we're reviewing any comments received from stakeholders and see if there's anything that we can do or that we're able to do in terms of addressing your comments and concerns, which is understandable. Okay, another question. Could a requirement be added that if a site chooses to perform inspections every 14 days and after a rain event of ½ inch or more, they have a rain gauge on site? Michaela, would you like to address that briefly? Sure,
thank you. At this time, it's not a requirement in our construction general permit. If that's something you want to see, we'll take the comment. We'll go back and see if that's a possibility. If that's something we can add to the permit. So thank you for your comment. Back to you, Rebecca.
Okay. Our chat box is empty. We still have 75 attendees. So please, don't be shy. We can't see you. You can be anonymous. If you want me to, I will not say your name. But please go ahead and provide comments right now if you want. Any questions you have that we could answer right now, we're open to this. At the same time, if we don't receive them, then we will end the meeting earlier. We're not going to keep everybody here for an hour if nobody's ready to provide any more comments or ask questions. We do have a question. Are there any plans to improve the STEERS database? That's a really good question. And so I want to answer it twofold. So first of all, STEERS is the program that allows you to enter into the e-permit system to access the different modules that are within STEERS. So STEERS itself is really, you get an account to access it, but then once you're in there, then you are in the e-permitting system, which then for us, you access our stormwater module for either the construction, the multi-sector development permit, or whatever. So STEERS is for the entire agency. And, even though there's some things that we have heard people will like differently, we would like differently. It's just not, feasible sometimes to make those changes, but feel free to provide very specific comments of what is it that you do not feel that STEERS is doing efficiently or that it's missing, and we will be able to submit those comments over to our STEERS staff. If there's a question within the stormwater module in e-permits, then that's something that in most cases, we as the program area, we can work with our Water Quality Division IT staff to make those changes. So if you think that a question is not flowing correctly, if a question is not clear, or something like that, or if we don't have enough help, because we have help items for you to understand what we're looking for in that question. If we can improve the help items or add a help item or instructions, please let us know. Again, give us a very specific comment as to what the issue is, and we can work with that. But there are certain things within the e-permitting system that is the same across the board, such as general characteristics or general information that is not just for us. Those changes would apply to air, water, waste. Everybody that is in e-permits, it would apply. So sometimes it really takes, as they say, an act of Congress to make certain changes. But again, we're open for you to provide those suggestions or comments or concerns, and we'll be happy to send them to the appropriate channel to make sure that they get considered. So please, send us very specific items to our email box. Okay, we have Kevin Hurley with the City of Dallas. Hello, Kevin. Haven't seen you in a long time. He asked, where can I find the list of current oil and gas operators authorized by EPA's construction development permit? That's a good question. EPA, and we will put on our website. I think we'll go ahead and put on our website that the link. So EPA sends us the link where you can go to their e-permit search, if you call it, and you can go in and you can identify those. And right now, which is a really good question, because right now it gives me the opportunity to say that when EPA did generate that list for us earlier this year, there's about 2,000 entities that are currently under their construction development permit that are in Texas, identified as being in Texas with oil and gas. So those are the 2,000 entities that we're looking to come over to our permit when we have the amendment issued. But we will let you know of the link where you can go find that on EPA's website. So thank you, Kevin. The next item is from Patrick. He says, I suggest making an effort to define a rain event. I realize this is difficult. How many hours of wet and dry period qualifies as a rain event? Can you have 2 rain events in a single day? So excellent comments. We will look at that. We do know that Michaela yesterday gave a keynote presentation at the South Central AICA conference, and she did have this question, and some people apparently were a little excited. So Michaela, would you like to tell us a little bit about what the feedback was from that audience?
Sure. So yeah, at the conference, I heard from a lot of different consultants and people who implement the construction general permit in Texas, and they did discuss how it seems like a lot of folks across the state are implementing it differently than how EPA is proposing to describe, when inspections occur over that 24-hour period. So I do understand that that causes a lot of confusion for operators, and if there's a way we can define it, we'll certainly, try and do so. That's a great comment that we'll certainly take back and see what we can do to make things more clear for our operators so that everyone's doing it the same and everyone understands what we expect of them. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Michaela. So before I go on to the other comments or questions that we have on the chat box, I would like to give you a reminder to please sign in on our attendee link. There's a link that you need to go ahead and use to register yourself to let us know that you attended. Currently, our Teams Live, our Teams Live shows that there's 73 attendees. However, we only have 41 that have registered officially in our attendee link. So please, go ahead and go to the attendee link and register so that we know that you were in attendance. We appreciate it. Okay, the next comment is from an anonymous person. The oil and gas portion of the proposed general permit. Will definitions for this be added, and will there be a detailed section in the general permit that will give us more detail on how an MS4 will need to look for? Okay, I'm trying to understand the comment, but yes, right now, currently, as Michaela said, the permit is in the official public comment period, the amendment that we're doing right now. So you have till Monday to go ahead and review that permit, the portions regarding oil and gas, to see if you feel that there's anything else that we need to include. But right now, we did try our best to include exactly this entities that are going to be coming into the fold that need to be regulated. And in addition, there's that website that EPA has that Michaela mentioned that is on our slides that is really good to explain which is exempt and what is not exempt in terms of the activities that need to be regulated for oil and gas under our construction general permit. But please provide anything more specific if you see that we don't have what you think you need, and we can either consider it to add it to the amendment or add it to this renewal that we're working on, or maybe something that we can include in the guidance that maybe our small business local government assistance group can help us, because they have developed a lot of great tools that maybe this is something that could fit in that in one of those guidance and resources that we have. So thank you for your comment. We will definitely consider this. And believe me, Michaela and I, as we were working with EPA and even our legal person, attorney working with us, we learned a lot about oil and gas and what's allowed and not allowed. And so we understand your concerns. So we want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay, so the next item is from an anonymous person. Does the permit note whether conditions at the site that require corrective action constitute a permit violation, or that they would constitute violations only if not addressed within the requisite time required? If not, is that something that can be included? Michaela.
Thank you for that question. That's a great one. I think I received a similar question at the conference I attended yesterday. Looks like you also added that, for example, a silt fence that requires replacement or a berm that requires modification. At this time, I understand EPA has added some language related to that in their permit, and we have not proposed to add the same language. If that's something you want, let us know. This is a great comment. We can go back to the permit and review what we have for corrective actions and whether or not that's a permit violation. So right now, I don't believe it's clarified in the same way the DPA's is. So we will definitely go back and look at the permit and see if improvements could be made to that section. Back to you, Rebecca.
Okay, so the next one is, can TCEQ provide guidance on site notice posting in your utility type projects? Can the notice be mobile with the construction crews? This is a really good comment. We will definitely look at it. I know that linear construction, utility construction is very unique and very different and very long. And so, you know, and things keep moving as you are moving along, finishing certain portions of that project. So definitely is something that we will consider. If you have more specifics, please let us know of the concerns, more specifically the concerns and how you think this can be better addressed in the permit. Okay, so the next common question we have is from the City of Corpus Christi. The comment period for the oil and gas amendment is the next 2 weeks, but the comment period for the permit renewal is next year. Is that correct? Okay, so this is the question. So right now, the oil and gas amendment to the construction general permit that was published on September 24, the comment period ends, the official comment period ends this coming Monday on October 25th. And those comments need to be submitted through our Chief Clerk's office comment process. However, for this permit renewal, what we just presented to you now, not the oil and gas amendment, but what we just presented now for the renewal for the 2023 construction zone permit, those comments you have 2 weeks. Right now, you can go ahead and submit any comments from now through November 5th, and those we are in the informal process. And then when the amendment gets approved and effective later next year in January, then that becomes part of the existing permit. So then that's going to allow you to go ahead and also comment on it again if you want to when the renewal for the 2023 gets published later next year. So you actually have different ways to provide comments and input. Okay, another question from City of Georgetown. Again, it's an MS4. It can be difficult to track down an operator within the MS4, especially if the operator never submitted the NOI to the MS4. Is there a way on STEER's database contact information regarding the NOI or SWIP that can be available to help the MS4 track down information so that if a letter of enforcement needs to be submitted or obtaining the SWIP within the 24 hours as defined in the CGP? Sub-supervisors do not work on site, and the construction site notice on site has contact information that is no longer valid or is missing. It makes it difficult to track down operators to get construction sites in compliance, especially if major observations are seen on site that need to be addressed as soon as possible. So thank you for your comment. We do have, in our division, we have a water quality search engine that you can find who it is that is within your MS4 area, within your city, your boundary. However, it doesn't provide the contact information. It just has the name of the entity. So right now, that's the only way that you can easily identify an entity, but the contact information is something that you will need to request from us, and then we can do an open records request and we can provide that information. Michaela, is there anything else that you want to add to that response for that comment?
No, I think you covered it all. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. But we will look into it and provide any information that maybe we can give you, Tiffany, if there's another way for you to easily access that information that we may not know of. But you can always ask for an open records request if needed for your area. So next comments question is from Patrick. Because we already have to mark whether a site is in the Edwards Aquifer in the NOI. Is it possible to have the Sears NOI automatically notify the Edwards Aquifer program instead of making an additional notification directly to the Edwards Aquifer program? That is a really good comment, and that, you know, we would love that. That's something that we, I think, received also regarding MS4. Some MS4 said, can, you know, they automatically send it to us, but, you know, that's going to be a lot of work that, you know, we probably don't even know how, at least how to do that. Maybe our IT people do, but that is a really good comment. We will take it to our IT staff and our IRD staff to see if there's anything that we can do. So we appreciate that comment, and we'll let you know what we unveil, if it can be done or not. But I know that, you know, some things are just too complicated to do. So we'll see what we can do or not, and we'll let you know. Okay, another question is, where do we sign in to show we attended? Oh, the CGP renewal. So the link, the attendee link, where is that located?
It's going to be at the very top of the Q&A. Maybe one of our producers could pop it in again so that it shows up kind of in as the newest one. So either you can scroll to the top, or if you wait a minute, we'll send in another link so that it appears as the newest item.
Thank you. Yes, one of our producers is trying to do that, and then you can go ahead and sign in, because we definitely want to know exactly, you know, it's best who attended so that we have a good record for that. Okay, so our Danielle Monroe, one of our producers, says she has already posted the attendee link, so you should be able to see it now. Click on it so that you can sign in. Okay, thank you. So the chat box is empty again. We still have 67 attendees. Thank you for 67 attendees hanging on. We appreciate it. You know, any ideas based on comments others are providing, you know, thinking of what we just discussed. Again, you know, anything that you feel you want us to consider, again, with as much specificity as possible, please let us know. If you don't do it right now in the chat box, you can go ahead and submit it. Comments are due November 5th. So you have this 2-week informal period to go ahead and submit any comments for us to consider. And so right now, the stakeholder comment information where you submit comments is posted. You can see the slide. So comments need to be submitted to swgp@tcq.texas.gov. Since this mailbox receives a lot of emails that we get every day from you, permittees, consultants regarding all of our permits, please be sure to include in the subject line 2023 CGP renewal. That way it's very easy for Dan, because he's the one that monitors this mailbox, for Dan to know that this is a comment specific to the construction development permit renewal, so that we address them appropriately. And remember, the deadline is November 5th, so you have 2 weeks to submit those comments. So right now we have another comment from Patrick. To save paper, instead of physically including the CGP in the SWIP, can the requirement be to include a reference to the TCEQ website where the electronic CGP resides? Thank you for your comment. We will consider that, Patrick. Alex O'Connor with the City of San Marcos says, thank you. We say thank you back to you. Thank you for attending. We appreciate your attendance and your comments. We have another one, anonymous. Wording for delegation of signatories will be edited to include requirements through steers as MSGP. That's an excellent question. So that's something that we are looking into, but we didn't really include it as a proposed item because right now we're running into some little difficulties. Well, they might not be little, they're big difficulties through the STEER system, but you are correct. With our MSGP, we made now the delegation of signatory forms be submitted electronically instead of paper because we were receiving thousands and thousands of them. And so we needed to reduce that paper, also help us because we have to code every single paper to file it with our central file room. So that's a lot of coding that we have to do, and carpet tunnel, is not a good thing. But anyway, so with the MSGP, we were successful to get the delegation of signatory form be required now and entered through STEERS. So entities are already doing that through STEERS. We've also tried to implement that for the construction development permit now. However, we ran into some difficulties regarding the small site operators. So right now we don't have an answer, but we are looking into it, and we will let you know if we do consider it. But yes, we would love to have all these delegation of signatory forms submitted for the construction development permit through STEERS as well. So know that that is in the works, but we don't have an answer yet. Okay, the next item is from Anonymous. For the handout, we are not seeing a link to download complete handout showing what the slide's showing. Is this supposed to be in handout, or is it just one page agenda available currently? Okay, so when you go to our stakeholders webpage, you scroll down and there's a table that lists every single stakeholder meeting we've had. And so this one is going to be at the very top. The first handout you're going to see, and you probably see me backwards, but the first handout that you see on the left-hand side of that table is the agenda. If you look at the right-hand side of that table, it's going to be a handout that's the 3-page handout that has the list of changes. Later next week, you're going to see in second to the last column, the presentation will be posted on that column where it says presentation handouts. But the handout with the changes is already there, and it's 3 pages, and it's on the last column of that table. And if you can't, easily find it, if you're having problems downloading, please send us an email, and we will be happy to email that handout to you. Okay, so again, while I wait for people to provide more comments or questions, this is our Stormwater team contact information that you can see on our slide. For the Stormwater team, the Stormwater team includes the 5 permit writers that we have, and you can call us at the general number of 4671. You can send technical questions to SWGP mailbox. But then if you have specific questions about the construction development permit or the multi-sector development permit regarding applications, STEERS, e-permits, those kinds of questions that are administrative, then you submit those to our Stormwater Processing Center. Their phone number is at the 3700, and Joe and Ursula will answer the phone. And then they also monitor the SW permit mailbox. So you would send them an email at swpermit@tcq.texas.gov. And Joe and Ursula will respond to you with any administrative questions you have. But again, if you have questions regarding STEERS in terms of you cannot access your account, then that's a STEERS question. That is not an e-permits question. If you have e-permits questions related to processing the application and questions, then you call us. You can also call Small Business Local Government Assistance. They're a great resource and always there to help all of you, and even us. Okay, so this is our team. Like I said, I'm the team leader. Then we have Dan that you can't see right now on camera, but he's available to answer questions, and Michaela. We have then Olivia Jimenez, who just joined us recently. Dante Fichetti, who joined us as a contractor a couple of years ago and was just hired earlier this year as a permit writer. Then we have Madison Taylor, who's the newest member of the team. So those are the permit writers. And then we have Joseph and Ursula, who are with the Stormwater Processing Center, that are excellent, at helping you with e-permits questions. So the other comment that we have or question is, can a third-party inspection company be delegated as a signature for reports only? Michaela.
Thank you. That's a great question. So yes, technically they could be. They still have to meet the requirements listed in the rule, and that's specifically 30 Texas Administrative Code 305.128. So if they meet that description, they can be delegated. It doesn't matter if they're a third party, just as long as they meet the description in the rule to qualify them as being a delegated representative. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Michaela. So another question from the city of Lubbock. Does your office provide any steers navigation tools and or how-to videos or documents to assist municipalities with training specifically for the MSGP and CGP? We do not enter DMRs, benchmarks, and inspections of those permits ourselves, but would like to assist our businesses and operators with training. Excellent question, City of Lubbock. That is something that, our awesome small business local government assistance staff is working on. They are working on to help with tools and resources to help small businesses, with a multi-sectional permit, as well as operators with the construction zone permit. So we do have efforts that they've done in order to help people understand how to apply VIE permits. So there is something already in the works for that, as well as for DMRs and benchmarks, how they need to now be submitted for the MSGP via NetDMR. That the NetDMR website has a lot of excellent information, videos, tutorials that you can use. And if those do not work, then Small Business Local Government Assistance has said that they're willing to see if there's something that we might be able to do that is more tailored towards the needs of a specific permit. But for now, the NetDMR, there are tools so we can go ahead and provide that web page that we already have with great information. But thank you for your comment. We will discuss with Small Business Local Government Assistance to see if there's something that we can do specifically for this construction zone permit and have it ready for the renewal or even before that. Okay. The next comment is, could you please add the designated third-party rule reference in the chat?
I'll pull that up and I'll send a link and the reference in the chat box if you give me just a moment.
Thank you. So I'm very pleased with the comments that we received, the questions that we're getting. I'm so glad that you guys are engaged and willing to share your experiences, your concerns with us. We want to make this construction zone permit, be better, improve its readability, improve what the intent is, so that inspectors are, know what to do, the operators know what to do, the MS4s know what to do, and of course our TCEQ staff, our investigators also. So please, this is not your last opportunity. You have 2 weeks. We'll accept comments till November 5th, and then we will go ahead and review all those comments, consider them, and figure out how best to address them. And if they're not specific to the permit itself, if it's for guidance, then we will see how we can address that in guidance. If it's regarding steer study permits or NetDMR, then we will forward those comments to those programs that handle that. So again, right now the chat box is empty. We still have 62 attendees. So please, don't be shy. Submit your comments, your question. We'll be happy to see what we can do to address them. We will give you a couple of minutes. If not, then I guess we will end the meeting sooner. So right now it's 11:15 almost. So you will get to go and have an early lunch if we don't have any more comments. Okay, so I think we'll probably give maybe a couple more minutes. If we don't receive any comments, then we'll go ahead and close, because again, I don't want to keep you longer than is needed, but we definitely appreciate you attending the meeting, sticking around with us to see what questions are asked, maybe comments received right now that we're reading trigger something in your mind and you want to provide input. That's great. Tiffany says, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, appreciate it. Patrick is on a roll. You know, I want to know who Patrick is. Which Patrick is this? But anyway, Patrick, he says, the EPA is proposing to increase the definition of qualified inspector to include additional training, such as something similar to CISEC or CESSWI. I don't remember the name of the acronym, but anyway, that's the acronym, without actually specifying a specific certification. What is TCEQ's current stance on requiring increasing the standard of qualification education for stormwater inspections? So that's a very good comment, and I think we sort of briefly touched on it earlier, but right now we're not looking at doing anything like that, but we are still open for comments, input, anything you can provide to support something. But again, you know, the way that the agency set up, the way that we do some of our certification or training can limit how we proceed with some of these comments. But if there's something that we could do to address it, maybe not through certification, like you're saying, then we'll be happy to consider that and see what we can do. Corpus Christi says, thank you. Thank you, Corpus. So then we have Carrie Ann will ask, there is very little language in the permit about chemical storage and sanitary facilities. When I inspect the site, I tell the facility to move porta cans away from storm drains and to make sure that chemicals are clearly labeled. Sometimes they will argue with me saying it isn't required, but yet it seems to be common sense. Okay, thank you for your comment. We will look at that and see if there's anything that we could do and address in the permit to make things a little bit clearer for you. Okay, so we already did Patrick's. Okay, so then Rick says, thank you for this opportunity to engage and listen. Thank you, Rick, we appreciate it. The next one is from Anonymous. As raised previously, it may be that site conditions during certain rain events make a site inspection not safe. EPA's permit allows for documenting unsafe conditions. Would TCEQ consider adopting such a provision? That's a really good comment, and we will look into that. That's not something that we really honed in when we were reviewing EPA's proposed permit to see if we could do that, but we definitely can consider that. Michaela, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a great comment and something that we're definitely going to go back and look at and see what we can do to make it clear that we don't want anyone harming themselves, obviously conducting inspections. So we'll see how we can clarify that in the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anonymous, I guess, continues to say, documented that site conditions are not safe, so the failure to inspect during such conditions are not considered a permit violation. So thank you. I think that's connected to his previous comments. So appreciate that. And then Patrick seems like he's finished with his comments for now. Says, thank you for answering our questions. He appreciates it. Thank you for providing comments, Patrick. Okay, anything else? We still have 58 attendees hanging strong. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you hanging with us. I can't see you. I wish we could see each other, but you could see us a little bit. Okay, well, again, if we could go back to the previous slide, please, Erica. Our producer, Erica, is doing a great job. Thank you, Erica. So again, this is how, you have the opportunity to go ahead and submit comments to us and input. This information is also included on the agenda handout. It's also on our website. So please, feel free to, at any time between now and November 5th, email us comments. And again, if you can be as specific as possible, we would appreciate it. Go ahead and note the section of the permit or the page of the permit. Support your comment with, a reason why we really need to consider it. Give us examples, anything to support it so we understand what's going on and where you're coming from. And also provide your information, your contact information. That way, if we want to call you to have you elaborate more on that, we definitely want to be able to do that. We have done that in some cases where we really need to get into more specifics and more details as to why somebody has a comment or a concern. Okay, Anonymous has a comment saying, thank you for providing this session to go through the proposed changes. This is very helpful. Thank you, we appreciate it. It's also helpful to us. Your input is very valuable because you're the ones that are down there, as they say, on the ground, doing things, living this every day. So please, give us your valuable input. Then Anonymous says, a lot of great information. Thank you. You're welcome. We appreciate you. So we like those kind of comments as well. Keep them coming. Okay, any other comments? It's 11:22. I guess if everybody's okay, then we will end it because the last comments were just thanking us. And like I said, we like those, we appreciate it. But if there aren't any other comments related to the construction development permit, then I think we've had almost 50 minutes of stakeholder input and discussion. So that's been really good time. We really appreciate your comments. Again, please, submit anything else that you feel you need to submit before November 5th. We appreciate it. And so, I thank my team for all the work that they've done. We work really hard to review the comments that we've compiled over the years. If you give us a comment during the permit cycle, we save those comments. And then when it's time to start preparing for the renewal, we revisit those comments and see what we received and how we can tackle them, as well as all the input that we receive internally. So please know that all comments are looked at and are considered. We do not dismiss any comment. For this informal comment period, we do not provide a response. For the formal comment period, when the permit is published in the Texas Register and the public notice goes in the newspapers, we do have a formal response to comments. But for this process, since it's informal, we don't do that. So just know that, we will address every single comment as we can, either in the permit, the fact sheet guidance, or leave it for another time. But we do take every comment that's important and consider that. But again, my team is wonderful in gathering that information and understanding and researching. We do a lot of research sometimes throughout other states and EPA to see what they're doing and see if there's something that we can take that would be good for us to implement. And Tiffany's saying that Helen left TCEQ. I'm not sure which Helen you're talking about. I'm sorry. But if you can send us an email, we will let you know. Okay, well, I guess we'll wait to 11:25 and we will officially end the meeting and adjourn it. But thank you very much. If the producers do not have a problem, we will end it, at 11:25. If that's okay. Okay. All right, well, it's 11:25. We will end this. You know, we still have 45 attendees that hung on with us till this time. So we appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And keep those comments coming. Bye.